The slap landed sharp and loud, slicing through the hum of the engines like a gunshot. Naomi Braxton didn't flinch, not even a blink. She sat still in her seat, hands folded over her lap as the heat spread slowly across her cheek. The cabin fell dead silent. Champagne flutes rattled in their holders. Eyes widened. A businessman across the aisle dropped his phone. The woman who'd hit her, Candace, the head flight attendant, stood above her, face flushed, voice shaking. "You don't belong here," she hissed. "Move to the back, or I'll have you removed." Naomi looked up, calm as still water. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," she said softly. Then she picked up her phone and sent one short message. "Activate." No one on board knew what those 8 letters meant. No one knew the woman they just saw get slapped across the face owned the plane they were flying on. And within the hour, careers would end before they even landed. 8 hours earlier, Seattle, WA. The air was crisp on the tarmac, the early sun casting long shadows as Naomi Braxton stepped out of the black sedan. She wore no jewelry, no sunglasses, no designer scarf, just a fitted navy blazer, slacks, and a pair of practical low heels. Her silver-gray hair was brushed back into a low chignon. To most, she might have looked like a retired professor or an old-school librarian heading to a conference. And that was exactly what she wanted. A young driver opened the rear door and handed her a slim leather case and a single carry-on. "You sure you don't need anything else, Ms. Carter?" he asked, using the alias on her boarding pass. "I'm fine, Charles," she smiled. "Thank you." Naomi ascended the jet bridge alone. This wasn't just any flight. It was her first since finishing radiation treatments 2 months earlier. Her body was still tired, but her mind was sharper than ever. This flight was meant to be quiet, observational. She wasn't here as Naomi Braxton, billionaire founder of Braxton Strategic Holdings. She was simply here as Vanessa Carter, a woman traveling alone in first class, under the radar. She needed to see for herself how her newest acquisition treated people who didn't look the part. Ecliptica Air, a boutique airline that prided itself on premium service for premium clients. And as of 8:15 a.m. that morning, she owned 67% of it. The paperwork had gone through quietly, via a proxy deal orchestrated through Braxton's private equity arm. The press wouldn't know for another week. But today she was flying it, as a regular guest, just to see what kind of culture she had inherited. She stepped onto the plane and felt it immediately. The look, the sizing up. Candace, tall, angular, mid-40s, offered a dry good morning without making eye contact. Her smile had been wide for the man before Naomi, but now it faded. Naomi offered her boarding pass. "Ma'am," Candace said, voice thin. "Economy's through the other door." "I'm in 1A," Naomi replied calmly. Candace glanced at the pass, then back at Naomi. "Of course." The word was hollow. She stepped aside reluctantly. Naomi took her seat. The leather felt warm, lived in. She tucked her carry-on neatly beneath the seat in front of her and placed her phone on the armrest, screen facing down. A slim green light blinked once, barely visible. She was being recorded, just in case. The first 20 minutes were quiet, except for Candace. Naomi noticed how the smiles were reserved for certain passengers. Clean-cut businessmen, slim blondes with Chanel cardigans, couples with matching Louis Vuitton luggage. For her, just a passing glance. No offer of a drink, no welcome. It wasn't new. Naomi had built an empire under the radar precisely because she didn't look like what most people expected power to look like. That was her edge. But today felt like a test. At 30,000 feet, Candace came back down the aisle. Naomi had adjusted slightly in her seat, stretching one leg out carefully into the aisle. Not enough to block anything, just enough to ease the pain that sometimes flared in her hip. Candace saw it, didn't say a word. She changed her path and walked straight into Naomi's leg. The tray of sparkling water jolted, tilted, and spilled across Naomi's lap. Candace gasped, loud and theatrical. "You need to watch your legs, ma'am." Naomi looked down at her soaked slacks, then up again. Calm, even. "You walked into me?" she said softly. "I was trying to serve," Candace snapped. "You caused a scene." The businessman across the aisle shifted uncomfortably. A woman nearby murmured, "Why doesn't she just move?" Naomi's voice was calm. "All I asked for was the same respect you give everyone else." Candace leaned in, close. "Respect is earned, sweetheart." And then, without warning, she slapped her. Now, back in row 1A, Naomi sat as if nothing had happened. A faint pink mark bloomed on her left cheek, but her hands remained folded. Her phone screen lit up again. Contingency protocol activated. ETA to diversion, 47 minutes. She turned to the businessman beside her and said quietly, "You might want to buckle up. Things are about to change." He looked at her, puzzled. "You okay?" Naomi smiled gently. "Oh, I'm fine," she said. "But I can't say the same for her." The flight was still cruising smoothly at 32,000 feet, but in Naomi Braxton's mind, the air had changed. There was a stillness in her chest. Not fear, not anger, just a deep, clear knowing. She leaned her head against the window. Outside, the clouds were cotton thick, suspended like soft landmines in a frozen sea. From this height, the world below seemed irrelevant. But Naomi knew better than anyone. It never was. Back in row 1A, she sat in silence, her cheeks still faintly stinging. The slap hadn't hurt nearly as much as the implication behind it. That she didn't belong, that her presence was offensive, confusing, wrong. But she'd faced worse, much worse. Naomi had spent decades hearing what she couldn't do. She was too quiet, too black, too female, too old, too unqualified, too invisible, then too successful, too independent, too powerful, and now, apparently, too out of place to belong in first class on her own plane. She closed her eyes, and her thoughts drifted to Asheville, the quiet North Carolina town nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains where she lived in a cedar-paneled home overlooking a private lake. It was the only place in the world where she didn't feel watched. It was where she'd gone after her diagnosis, stage 2 breast cancer. It hit her out of nowhere in her early 60s, just when she thought she could finally start enjoying the life she'd built. The house had become her retreat, a place to meditate, recover, and plan. Especially plan. Because if there was one thing Naomi Braxton never stopped doing, it was building. Whether it was her body, her company, or her legacy. While others assumed she'd vanished from the business world, Naomi had been quietly acquiring strategic stakes in logistics networks, fuel supply chains, even flight catering companies. All through proxy firms, silent partnerships, and shell entities. The media hadn't caught on. That was the point. Her largest acquisition yet had been finalized less than 6 hours ago. Ecliptica Air, a boutique airline marketed toward the elite tech crowd, luxury influencers, and Fortune 500 executives. Their marketing tagline was nauseating. For those who breathe rarefied air. Naomi had studied their quarterly reports, reviewed complaints from staff, and flagged a disturbing trend in service disparities. When she learned about their internal culture, who got promoted, who got pushed out, she knew she couldn't ignore it. So she made an offer, discreet, generous, untraceable. $842 million, paid through Braxton Strategic Holdings Hong Kong affiliate. By 8 a.m. that morning, she owned 67% of the company, but she didn't announce it. She wanted to fly it first, to see how they'd treat a woman like her when they didn't know who she was. And now she had her answer. Candace's voice returned to the cabin, snipping at another passenger who dared ask for a second sparkling water. Naomi didn't react. She simply tapped her phone. The screen lit up. The encrypted app her CTO built specifically for acquisitions like this, Blackbird. was already in motion. Command accepted. Divert to SAN B. Notify legal and PR. Security team deployed. She turned the brightness back down and folded her hands again. Across the aisle, the silver-haired businessman leaned toward her slightly. "I hope you won't think it's rude, but are you someone important?" he asked softly. Naomi turned her head, one brow raised. "Why would you ask that? You haven't said much, but you don't seem worried." Naomi smiled faintly. "Let's just say, I know how this ends." The man chuckled awkwardly. "I hope that means the flight gets better." "For some," she said. "Yes." Back in the rear galley, Grace, the younger flight attendant, was pale, chewing her lip. She'd seen Candace lose her temper before, but she'd never seen her strike a passenger. Grace wanted to say something, but she was new, disposable, a contract worker hoping for a permanent slot. And Candace had made it clear, speak out, and your days are numbered. But the moment she saw Naomi's calm, measured face after the slap, something shifted. That wasn't the face of someone who'd let this go quietly. Grace discreetly unlocked her phone and texted the only contact she knew might listen. Amara, HR Director, Ecliptica HQ. "Hey, something happened on Flight 216. It's bad. Really bad." Within a minute, Amara replied, "We know. We're watching the cabin cam. Do nothing. Landing early. Execs en route." Grace's hands trembled as she tucked her phone away. She didn't know who Naomi really was, but she now understood. This was bigger than a flight delay. 28 minutes later, the cabin lights flickered. The intercom chimed. "Ladies and gentlemen," the pilot said, voice clipped and nervous. "Due to a minor systems concern, we'll be making an unscheduled landing in San Benito Regional. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." Candace blinked. "What? San Benito? That's not even on our route." She picked up the service phone and dialed the cockpit. Moments later, the captain himself stepped out. His face was pale. He walked directly to Naomi's seat. Candace trailed after him. "Captain, what are you—" "Ma'am," the captain said, looking Naomi in the eye. "Ms. Braxton, I'm here to formally apologize for what occurred. We're following your directive." Gasps rippled through first class. Candace froze. What? Who?" Naomi finally stood. Her voice was calm, precise, undeniable. "I'm Naomi Braxton. I own this aircraft. As of this morning, I also own the majority stake in Ecliptica Air." Candace took a step back. "You can't be serious." Naomi turned to the stunned passengers. "I apologize for the disruption to your flight. There will be more clarity shortly." Candace's face drained of color. Grace watched from the galley, lips parted, her breath caught in her chest. Naomi picked up her phone one last time. "Confirm termination protocol. In-flight notification. Candace R. plus a team." Confirmed. The next hour would change the airline's future, and Candace's forever. But Naomi? Naomi remained still, unshaken, ready, because this wasn't revenge. This was reconstruction. The first drop of water had already soaked through the hem of Naomi's slacks when Candace snapped. "You need to watch where you put your legs," she barked, waving the nearly empty tray for emphasis. Naomi didn't move. She simply looked up from the puddle forming on the floor. Her voice was calm, measured. "You walked into me." A few rows down, someone gasped quietly. Others shifted, pretending not to notice. But the energy had changed. The air was tight now, the tension thick enough to chew. "You're disrupting service," Candace went on, loud enough for half the cabin to hear. "First class has standards, and frankly, you've made enough of a scene." Naomi didn't flinch. Her voice, when it came, was quieter than Candace's, but carried farther. "All I asked for was the same respect everyone else received." Candace leaned closer, eyes sharp. "Respect is earned, sweetheart, not assumed." And then, in a motion so fast, the cabin barely registered it, Candace slapped her. It wasn't accidental. It wasn't subtle. It was open-palmed, loud, and full of venom. The sound cracked through the cabin like a gunshot. Every head turned. Someone dropped a wine glass. A man across the aisle muttered, "Jesus Christ." Naomi's cheeks stung, but her expression didn't change. Her hands remained folded in her lap, her posture straight, her chin slightly lifted. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't raise her hand. She simply turned her gaze back to Candace and said so quietly it made the silence louder, "You just made the worst mistake of your life." Candace took a step back, suddenly aware of the eyes now locked on her, not with admiration, but with discomfort. Her posture remained defiant, but something in her expression cracked, a flicker of confusion, doubt. And Naomi? She reached slowly, deliberately, for her phone. She typed one word, "Confirm." The screen flashed once, nothing more. Grace, the junior flight attendant who had witnessed the entire thing from a few rows back, brought a trembling hand to her mouth. She hadn't moved, hadn't breathed. Now, she stepped forward slightly, her voice barely audible. Should I call the captain?" Candace waved her off. "I'll handle this." But she was shaking now, just slightly. Not with rage, but with unease. Naomi looked away from her, returning her gaze to the window. "I would advise you," she said, still composed, "to sit down and wait." "For what?" Candace snapped, her voice cracking. "An apology? You're not getting one." Naomi smiled faintly, almost sadly. "No," she said, "not from you." Across the cabin, a man in a dark suit leaned toward his wife and whispered, "I think we're about to witness something." She nodded without speaking. 20 minutes passed in uneasy silence. Passengers whispered. Phones vibrated. The ripple of the slap, both literal and figurative, spread through the aircraft like an aftershock. Even the hum of the engine seemed more intense now. Naomi didn't speak again. She sat with the patience of someone who knew what was coming, like a chess player who'd already moved the queen and was waiting for the board to fall. Finally, the cockpit door opened. A uniformed pilot stepped out, face tense, lips pressed into a tight line. His name tag read Captain Reeves. He made eye contact with no one except Candace. "Ms. Reed," he said curtly, "please step aside. You're needed up front." Candace blinked. "Excuse me?" Captain Reeves repeated it, this time more firmly. "You're needed up front, now." Grace stepped forward instinctively, eyes darting between Candace and Naomi. She didn't understand what was happening, but she could feel it wasn't routine. Candace hesitated, then scoffed and pushed past Naomi. "Unbelievable," she muttered. "The way some people play the victim." Naomi didn't respond. She didn't need to. A few moments later, the captain returned, this time not alone. Behind him was a woman in a charcoal gray pantsuit, clipboard in hand, face unreadable. A name badge identified her as Elise Warner, Director of Operations. She stepped directly to Naomi's row, her heels silent against the carpet. "Miss Braxton," she said, voice low and even. Naomi turned. "Yes. I apologize for the delay in addressing what's just happened. We're diverting the flight to our emergency routing hub in Sacramento. We'll be on the ground in 42 minutes. A ground team is already in place." Naomi nodded. "Thank you." Elise glanced toward the front of the cabin. "Would you like to wait here until then, or—" "I'll stay," Naomi said. "Let the others think this is just turbulence." Elise gave a tight, respectful nod. "Understood." She turned to walk away, but Naomi added softly, "Be sure to have the Blackbird terminal online by the time we land." That stopped Elise cold. She turned back, stunned. "You're activating—" "Yes," Naomi said. "Full report. Begin documentation on all parties involved, especially the lead attendant." Several passengers shifted in their seats. The businessman across the aisle sat up straighter. The older woman who'd whispered about free upgrades earlier now shrank behind her scarf. Candace returned 5 minutes later, red-faced and visibly rattled. She didn't look at Naomi. She didn't speak. She walked quickly to the back galley and didn't reappear. Grace passed by quietly a few moments later and offered Naomi a glass of sparkling water, carefully balanced and delivered without a word. Naomi accepted it with a small nod. Grace whispered, "I'm sorry." Naomi gave her a look. Not warm, not cold, just knowing. "You weren't the problem," she said. Grace nodded once and disappeared down the aisle. The minutes stretched, but Naomi didn't move. She didn't pace, didn't take notes, didn't call anyone else. She just sat, hands still, eyes steady. The phone on her tray blinked again. A single alert. "Sacramento runway cleared. Legal and PR team on standby." Across the cabin, no one was speaking now. They weren't scrolling anymore. They were watching her. She didn't look like a woman who had been humiliated. She looked like a woman waiting for her moment. And when the wheels touched down 40 minutes later, and the cabin jolted with the sudden shift in altitude, Naomi Braxton smiled. Not because she was glad, but because the hour had arrived. The plane had begun its slow descent, but no one was thinking about the landing. The cabin was quiet now, too quiet. That humming buzz of polite small talk and ice tinkling in glasses was gone. It had been replaced with something far more fragile. A silence woven from tension, embarrassment, and confusion. Candace hadn't reappeared since stomping off after the slap. Naomi remained seated in 1A, her hands resting loosely in her lap. The sting in her cheek had long faded. What remained was something far more cutting. Clarity. Cold, calculated, and patient. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. She didn't need to raise her voice. She had already spoken in the only language that mattered at her level. Systems, protocols, power. A soft tone chimed overhead. The captain's voice came through the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be making an unscheduled landing in Sacramento due to a mechanical indicator we'd like to evaluate. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We'll be on the ground in approximately 22 minutes. Mechanical indicator." Naomi almost smiled. That's what power sounded like. Benign, unremarkable, coded. She had made one phone call in the form of a single word, confirm. And the wheels had turned. Entire departments had already mobilized. Her legal team was en route. HR had a 32-page dossier on Candace by now. And the AI system she'd quietly installed across Ecliptica Air's fleet, known internally as Blackbird, had just finished uploading the behavioral data from this flight. That system didn't record seat numbers or ticket classes. It recorded tone of voice, word frequency, micro-expressions, eye contact, and response latency. 5 key metrics Naomi's data science team had trained to predict service bias with frightening precision. She tapped her tablet quietly, pulled up the Blackbird dashboard, and waited. Across the cabin, Candace stood inside the forward galley, one hand gripping the edge of the counter. She was pale now, her earlier fury drained into something more complicated, confusion, and something like fear. Grace hovered a few feet away, awkward and unsure. She kept glancing toward the cockpit. "They've got her sitting up front like she's royalty," Candace hissed under her breath, mostly to herself. "Unbelievable." Grace said nothing. "I don't care who she is," Candace muttered again. "You don't get to disrespect me. I've done this job for 17 years. I've served everyone. I've trained half this crew. I've handled celebrities, senators, tech billionaires, crybabies in suits without ever being slapped with this much attitude." Grace shifted her weight from foot to foot. She didn't actually show any attitude, though. Candace shot her a glare. "Whose side are you on?" Grace dropped her gaze. "I'm not on anyone's side. I just..." She hesitated, then added, "It didn't feel right." Candace looked away. Whatever's going on, she's not walking out of this untouched. She thinks a few tears and a fancy boarding pass make her untouchable? Watch, she's gonna spin this like she's the victim. Back in row 1A, Naomi's tablet blinked. Blackbird AI Assessment, Flight E8216. Attendant, Candace Reed, Behavioral Score 41. D. Bias Indicators High. Key Flags, 86% decrease in warmth when interacting with female passengers of color, 78% increase in microaggressions based on tone, 0 eye contact during service interactions. Rows 1A, 3C, 6D. Recorded emotional volatility during conflict escalation. Naomi tilted the screen slightly, then minimized the report. She already knew the data would confirm what she'd experienced, but there was something grounding about seeing it quantified. Objective, cold, unignorable. She tapped the button that sent the report to Elise Warner, Director of Ops, along with a short note. Have HR prepare exit documentation, blacklist request pending final debrief. She didn't need to explain further. The businessman across the aisle, who had said nothing since the slap, now leaned over, voice low. Forgive me asking, but do you need a statement? I mean, if there's an investigation? Naomi turned to him, her face softening slightly. That's kind of you, but no need. It's already handled. He hesitated. You're not just another passenger, are you? Naomi smiled faintly. Not today. He nodded slowly, as if confirming a suspicion he hadn't realized he had until just now. At the back of the plane, Candace paced. Grace was watching her, arms folded, face tense. What are you even going to do when we land? Grace finally asked. Pretend it didn't happen? Candace spun around. I'm going to tell them the truth. She got aggressive. I defended myself. She didn't move. She didn't raise her voice, Grace said. Candace's voice sharpened. You weren't standing where I was. No, Grace replied quietly. But I was watching. Candace opened her mouth, then closed it again. For the first time, her eyes flicked to the curtain between her and first class. For a moment, she looked unsure. What if she is someone? She muttered. Grace didn't reply. Candace scoffed like she was trying to laugh off the thought. But it didn't reach her eyes. When the wheels finally touched down, the passengers barely reacted. Everyone had been waiting for this. No one knew exactly what was about to happen, but they could feel it, like the quiet before a storm. A black SUV waited beside the jet bridge. 3 figures in charcoal suits stood beside it, each with tablets and earpieces. As the seatbelt light dinged off, the PA system chirped. Miss Braxton, please remain seated. Our ground team will be boarding shortly to escort you. That name, Braxton, landed like a thunderclap. Across the cabin, passengers turned. Even those who hadn't witnessed the slap now looked confused. Candace, still standing near the galley, turned white. Braxton, she whispered. Grace looked at her, almost gently. Now you know. Naomi didn't move. She simply waited, calm and composed. The cabin door opened, and as 3 high-ranking executives from Ecliptica Air stepped onto the plane, carrying files, legal binders, and a visible air of nervousness. Naomi Braxton slowly rose to her feet. She adjusted her blazer. She picked up her phone, and she walked toward them, not like a victim seeking justice, but like a woman taking back her company. The conference room inside Sacramento Executive Terminal was sterile, windowless, and silent, just like Naomi wanted. It wasn't flashy. No city skyline, no gold plaques or crystal carafes. Just white walls, a long table, and the hum of central air. Clean, cold, corporate. She stood at one end of the table, blazer buttoned, posture straight. Her presence seemed to mute the room, even though she hadn't said much since stepping off the plane. Around her sat 5 people. The regional VP of Ecliptica Air, the director of HR, general counsel, the head of in-flight operations, and Elise Warner, director of ops, who had flown in on the previous flight. None of them spoke first. Naomi finally broke the silence. Thank you for assembling so quickly. The VP, a tall man in his 50s named Howard Lynn, cleared his throat. "Of course, Ms. Braxton. We, understand there was an incident?" Naomi didn't answer immediately. She reached into her bag, pulled out a tablet, and placed it gently on the table. One tap, Blackbird's interface opened. Data streams, behavioral graphs, and annotated timestamps filled the screen. She rotated the tablet so it faced them. "I'd rather not summarize," she said. "You can watch." She hit play. There it was, clear, high-resolution footage from the cabin. The AI-powered lens had captured every detail from multiple angles. Candace's dismissive glare. Her voice, raised just slightly louder with Naomi than with anyone else. The slap. The ripple of shock across the passengers' faces. No one said a word. When the video ended, Naomi pulled up the accompanying Blackbird report. "This flight wasn't an isolated failure of conduct. It was a pattern. My team's been running internal audits for 2 months. Candace Reed's behavior fits a recurring profile. She doesn't act out of policy. She acts out of bias, aggressively." The HR director shifted uncomfortably. "We hadn't seen this data before." "You weren't supposed to," Naomi replied. "Not until I finalized the acquisition." Elise leaned forward slightly. "We ran her through standard performance reviews, which were based on customer surveys filled out mostly by white men in business class." Naomi cut in. Her tone wasn't angry, just surgical. "Blackbird sees what they don't." Howard spoke again, slower this time. "Just to be clear, you're activating Blackbird officially across the company?" "I already did," Naomi said. "The board approved implementation last Friday. The slap just moved the rollout up." Silence. The head of in-flight ops finally asked, "What are your expectations?" Naomi's voice was firm, but calm. "Immediate termination of Candace Reed. Effective today. Full documentation sent to our industry network. I want her name flagged in the crew databases of every major airline group within our shared HR platform. No quiet transfers, no sweeping this under the rug." The HR director looked stunned. "You want to blacklist her from the entire industry?" Naomi looked at her for a long moment. "She slapped a passenger in first class, on camera, with witnesses, for no reason other than how I looked, and she showed no remorse. If she walks out of this with another job in aviation, then I've failed to do what I came here to do." That shut everyone up. Finally, Elise nodded. "Understood. We'll begin the documentation now." Naomi tapped her tablet and locked the screen. "Good," she said. "Now send for her." 10 minutes later, the door opened and Candace walked in. She looked different, smaller. Her confidence had been trimmed down to nervous glances and tight fists. She scanned the room and instantly understood what was waiting for her. Naomi didn't stand. "Ms. Reed," Elise began formally, "we've reviewed the full incident from Flight 26C. Based on that footage, along with performance data compiled over the last 60 days, the company has reached a final decision." Candace stared at Naomi. "You set me up." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "You baited me. This was a trap," Candace said, voice rising. "You wanted me to react, didn't you? You played the victim so you could make an example of me." Naomi folded her hands calmly. "You slapped a paying passenger. You weren't acting like a passenger." "I was sitting in my seat." Candace's jaw clenched. "You tricked me. You're some big executive and I didn't recognize you, and now you're, what, ruining my life to prove a point?" Naomi's voice was quiet, deliberate. "I didn't ruin anything. You did. I just turned the lights on." Candace opened her mouth, but Elise cut her off. "Your employment is terminated, effective immediately. You will not be rehired by any Ecliptica partner or affiliate carrier. And per Braxton Holdings advisory to our shared HR platforms, we will be submitting a formal flag." Candace stood frozen. "I gave this airline 17 years, she whispered. Naomi nodded slowly. "And you undid all of them in 17 seconds. The door opened again. Security personnel entered quietly. Candace stepped back instinctively, her expression raw, somewhere between outrage and devastation. "I'm going to fight this," she said shakily. "I'm not done." Naomi's voice didn't change. "Neither am I." Candace was escorted out. No one spoke for a while. Then Naomi rose, adjusted her blazer, and turned to the rest of the room. "Don't mistake this as revenge," she said. "This is reform. From now on, first class doesn't just mean bigger seats. It means equal dignity. If anyone on your teams can't deliver that, they don't belong here." She walked toward the door. Before stepping out, she paused. "And Elise?" "Yes, ma'am." "Have Grace scheduled for a meeting with me next week." The news didn't break like a headline. It unraveled, first as murmurs, then as questions, then as stunned silence across the terminal. Passengers exiting Flight 216 were met by a row of black SUVs. Ground staff stood straighter, airport personnel whispered, and someone, no one knew who, had posted a 17-second clip of the slap. Within an hour, it had over 100,000 views. By the time Naomi stepped back onto the tarmac in Sacramento, the world was already starting to watch. She didn't address it, not yet. She simply walked, with that same quiet poise she'd carried since boarding the plane that morning. Her assistants flanked her as they entered the press-ready lounge Ecliptica had scrambled to arrange. The branding was haphazard, a last-minute attempt at professionalism. A few executives waited, nervously adjusting their ties. Naomi barely glanced at them. She was focused on one thing: Grace. The young flight attendant sat at a table in the corner, clearly out of place among the high-level staff. She stood quickly when Naomi approached. "Miss Braxton," she said, almost breathless. I didn't expect—" Naomi raised a hand gently. "Sit, please." Grace obeyed, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I reviewed your file," Naomi said. "Your training scores, internal notes, supervisor feedback. You're new, but you've shown consistency." Grace swallowed. "Thank you." "You also hesitated," Naomi added. "Not because you didn't know what was right, but because you knew what it might cost you." Grace's eyes dropped. Naomi continued. "That kind of awareness isn't weakness. It's a sign of intelligence. Most people never develop it." Grace finally looked up. "I wanted to speak up, I really did. But Candace, she has pull, and I'm no one." Naomi leaned back slightly. "Don't say that again." Grace blinked. "You watched the whole thing," Naomi said. "You saw how people hesitated, how no one stepped in. That silence. It's what allows people like Candace to thrive." She paused. "And when you're in a system that rewards silence, choosing to even hesitate, to think, is the first crack in that cycle." Grace sat quietly for a beat. Then, almost whispering, "You're not like any executive I've ever seen." Naomi smiled faintly. "That's because I didn't become one to be seen." She stood. "You'll be hearing from my office. I have plans, and I need people who've learned to see in the dark." Grace stood too. "Yes, ma'am." Naomi nodded once, then left her to sit with those words. By mid-afternoon, the clip of Candace slapping Naomi had hit 500,000 views. It had no caption, no hashtags, just a title: "Flight Attendant Snaps, but she picked the wrong passenger." In the comments, the guessing game had already started. "That woman didn't flinch. That's not a regular passenger." You can feel she's someone. The silence, the way she looked at her. Anyone know who she is? I think she's powerful. This better end with the flight attendant getting fired. Naomi hadn't said a word to the press. Not yet. But she was ready now. That evening, inside a quiet media room lined with cameras, Naomi Braxton finally stepped to a microphone. Her posture, as always, was calm. Her voice, even and unmistakable. "My name is Naomi Braxton," she said. "And as of this morning, I am the majority shareholder of Ecliptica Air." There was an audible intake of breath behind the cameras. "I boarded Flight 216 under an alias. I did not seek special treatment. I did not wear designer labels, arrive with security, or announce my status. I simply took the seat I paid for and waited to be treated with the same dignity as every other passenger. She let that sit for a moment. And I was slapped in the face by a senior member of your crew. No dramatics, just the facts. And here's what matters, she said. If I hadn't been Naomi Braxton, if I'd been any other black woman with quiet clothes and silver hair, no title, no company, this story wouldn't be breaking today. It would have been buried. She looked into the camera, direct, unyielding. I don't want a public apology. I don't want tears from a uniformed stranger who got caught. What I want is this, a system where no one has to be rich to be respected. From the back of the room, someone clapped once, then again. Within seconds, the whole room joined in. Naomi didn't smile. She just stepped away from the mic. Outside the terminal, the sun was setting. Her SUV waited. She took a moment before stepping in, her gaze scanning the horizon. The worst part of the day was over, but the work, the real work, was only beginning. She turned to one of her aides. Let's meet with the operations team in the morning. I want a rollout plan for Blackbird by next quarter, and make sure it applies across all partners. Yes, ma'am. She paused. And one more thing. Anything. Let's build a feedback platform for passengers. Anonymized, real-time, multilingual. Not just surveys. Voice. Emotion detection. Let's give the voiceless a megaphone. The aide nodded. Naomi stepped into the SUV, closed the door gently behind her, and let the world fall silent for the first time all day. As the car pulled away, her phone buzzed. Another clip. A different angle. Uploaded minutes ago. The caption read, "She didn't just own the seat, she owned the plane." What would you have done if you witnessed that moment on the flight? Would you have spoken up or stayed silent like most passengers? Let us know in the comments below. Your voice might be louder than you think. The boardroom at Ecliptica Air's headquarters wasn't designed for emotion. It was all polished glass, cool marble floors, and a long obsidian table built for silent power plays. Today, however, every surface in the room felt tight with tension because the most powerful person in the room wasn't speaking yet. Naomi Braxton sat at the head of the table, arms relaxed, fingers loosely laced. She had yet to raise her voice. She didn't need to. The other board members glanced between each other, waiting. Most of them had only learned of her acquisition days ago. None of them had expected this kind of entrance, certainly not this fast, not this decisive, and definitely not with half the country watching. The HR chief cleared her throat. Miss Braxton, we've reviewed the Blackbird data and the footage from Flight 216. It's overwhelming. It's accurate, Naomi corrected, gently but firmly. There were nods around the table. Do you intend, another director asked cautiously, to use this incident as the foundation for broader reforms? Naomi met his eyes. This incident wasn't the foundation. It was the reveal. A long pause. Then she tapped her tablet and projected a dashboard onto the screen behind her. It was the core interface of Blackbird AI, her firm's proprietary in-flight behavioral analytics system. Heat maps, behavior flags, and trend curves populated the screen with crisp efficiency. Blackbird, Naomi explained, is not surveillance. It's accountability. It doesn't track passengers. It tracks patterns. It doesn't punish mistakes. It surfaces abuse. And it's already detected similar behavior on 3 other flights in the last month. Subtle but consistent. She paused. And all of it is internal, until it needs to be external. The COO shifted uncomfortably. Miss Braxton, we understand and respect your vision, but to publicly share crew evaluations? That could trigger union resistance, lawsuits, PR nightmares. It won't be public, Naomi said calmly. Not at first. Everyone leaned forward. We start by restructuring internal performance reviews. Shift weight away from self-reporting and anecdotal complaints. Let the data guide retraining, reassignments, or exits. Quietly, firmly, systematically. And the passengers? Someone asked. Naomi looked around the room. We're not a luxury brand if we treat dignity like a luxury. Silence. Then Elise, the director of operations, spoke up. And Candace Reed? Naomi nodded. She's been terminated. Her name has been submitted to our cross-platform HR compliance index. Someone frowned. The one that shares data with 6 other airlines? Yes, Naomi said. And soon to be 8. Murmurs spread. The legal counsel hesitated. That's not just firing. That's career erasure. Naomi didn't flinch. She erased herself when she struck a passenger. She made the choice. I'm just making sure no one else pays for it. Elise leaned forward. What about the internal response? Naomi paused. That's next. She stood and walked toward the window, looking out over the city skyline. It was still early morning, but the media storm was already surging. News alerts, hashtags, interview requests. And all she had done was say the truth. Once. Now came the echo. She turned back to the room. Within 48 hours, I want every crew member to receive access credentials for Blackbird Lite, so they can see how the system evaluates behavior. Transparency builds trust. After that, HR will issue revised performance frameworks. The COO raised a hand. If I may, how do you plan to deal with the inevitable pushback? Naomi's voice was level, with clarity, not defense. If someone pushes back on fairness, they've just identified themselves as part of the problem. No one had an answer to that. She returned to her seat, calm as ever. This isn't about Candace. She's just the story people are watching. But this is about who we are when the cameras aren't rolling. A brief silence. Then Elise looked up. And what do we call this new initiative? Naomi didn't hesitate. First class, every time. That afternoon, a new email landed in every Ecliptica Air employee's inbox. Subject, Service Standard Reset. Effective immediately from Naomi Braxton, owner and chair. Respect is not a tier. It is not optional. It is not earned through appearances. It is the baseline, the floor. If you cannot give it to every passenger, quiet, loud, wealthy, struggling, young, old, white, black, disabled, confident, nervous, you will not fly for us. Your badge is not a right, it's a contract, and we are rewriting that contract, starting now. Across the country, the message spread faster than expected. Not through press releases or corporate statements, but from passengers who had witnessed Flight 260's firsthand. Someone had posted a longer clip. Naomi sitting silently in her seat after the slap. The other passengers frozen, and that one chilling sentence, "You just made the worst mistake of your life." One comment under the post read, "That wasn't a threat, that was a forecast." Another added, "I didn't know her name until today. Now I won't forget it." Outside the headquarters, Naomi finally stepped into the sunlight. Her assistant followed, phone in hand. "There's a request for a media interview," she said. "CNN, ABC, and Oprah's team just called." Naomi raised an eyebrow but smiled. "Let them wait." She walked toward the waiting car, paused at the open door, and turned slightly. "I wasn't trying to go viral," she said. "I was trying to fix something." Then she got in and closed the door behind her. 3 days after the slap, the skies started to change. It didn't make headlines the way viral clips did. It wasn't a trending soundbite or a scandalous press conference. But within the aviation industry, inside HR offices, pilot lounges, and internal Slack channels, it hit like a lightning bolt. Blacklist. Activated. Candace Reed's name appeared on a confidential list circulated among 6 of the largest regional airline groups in North America. The list didn't contain reasons or context. It didn't need to. The digital note beside her file read simply, "Do not hire. Incident verified. Industry-wide flag." At the bottom of the page, in small gray font, was the phrase that made every recruiter sit up straighter. Endorsed by Naomi Braxton, Chair, Ecliptica Air, Braxton Strategic Holdings. It was a death sentence in aviation. Quiet, legal, permanent. Candace didn't understand what had happened, at least not at first. She had tried to pivot quickly. After her termination, she assumed there'd be a period of outrage online, maybe some embarrassment. Then she'd land somewhere else. Smaller airline, different coast, maybe even private jets. She had the experience, the hours, the credentials, but no one was returning her calls. By the time she applied for her third position and got the third rejection with no explanation, the panic set in. When she finally confronted a recruiter from a legacy carrier she'd once trained with, the woman on the other end of the call was blunt. "You've been flagged." "For what?" "I can't say, but you're not going to be hired anywhere in this system. My advice? Try another industry." Then the line went dead. Candace sat alone in her apartment that night, scrolling through the viral video for the 100th time. This time, the clip had a caption, "Power moves quietest at 30,000 feet." The top comment had nearly 80,000 likes. She wasn't just a passenger. She was the lesson. Candace slammed the phone down. Back at Ecliptica Air HQ, Naomi Braxton wasn't watching Candace. She had moved on. She stood in a boardroom full of suits from 6 airlines, 3 domestic, 2 international, 1 cargo carrier. All of them had flown in for an off-cycle strategy meeting they couldn't ignore, because Naomi had made a simple proposal. "If your crews operate in our skies, you will adopt the same standard of accountability." Some pushed back, lightly. One COO raised a polite objection. "Miss Braxton, I respect your position, but do you really expect competitors to restructure their internal systems around a proprietary tool you built?" Naomi's response was calm. "You restructure around fuel costs, around weather, around international slot times, but not around respect." The man went quiet. She looked around the room. "Blackbird won't be proprietary for long. I'm licensing it, but not to the highest bidder. Only to those who implement the code of conduct in full. This isn't about software. It's about culture." Someone murmured, "She's setting a new industry bar." Another added, "She's forcing us to choose between change or being left behind." Naomi nodded, arms crossed loosely. "Exactly." Within the hour, 3 carriers signed the agreement. 2 more asked for additional review. 1 declined. Naomi didn't flinch. They'd come around. The next day, she stood in front of a small press podium, not for drama, but clarity. No lights, no fancy backdrops, just her voice. Effective immediately, Blackbird AI will be deployed across participating carriers as a tool for passenger equity and employee fairness. It is not surveillance, it is protection for everyone, including crew members who've been overlooked, unheard, and undersupported. She paused. "And yes, it will lead to firings, but it will also lead to growth, retraining, and, for those willing to evolve, a better way to fly." One reporter shouted, "Is this a personal vendetta, Miss Braxton?" Naomi looked at him, eyes steady. "No," she said. "It's a professional responsibility." Online, hashtags trended again. Hatch Blackbird standard nabbed first class every time. Naomi Braxton did that. But Naomi didn't post about it. She had meetings, policies, rollout timetables, and grace. The young flight attendant had just finished orientation for her new position, Internal Ops Liaison, Blackbird Division. Her nameplate was still being printed, but her desk was already near Naomi's floor. When Grace stepped into her office for the first time, Naomi greeted her with a simple nod. "You've earned this," she said. Grace swallowed. "I still feel like I just stood there and—" Naomi stopped her with a glance. "You saw. You thought. That's where change begins." Grace smiled, shyly, but with something deeper now. Confidence. Naomi didn't smile back, but her voice softened. "We'll build this together, quietly, powerfully." Meanwhile, passengers continued to share their stories online. A man from Phoenix posted a thread. I was bumped from first class last year because a gate agent assumed my ticket was fake. I showed 3 IDs. No apology. I thought about that today, watching Naomi Braxton sit there, calm, unbothered, in control. I want to be like that someday. A woman from Toronto commented beneath it, "You don't have to be a billionaire to deserve that kind of calm. You just have to know your worth," Naomi reminded me. And somewhere, far from boardrooms, press conferences, or contracts, another flight attendant sat alone, watching it all unfold. She didn't say anything, but she did turn down her next shift. She needed time to think. By the end of the week, Naomi Braxton had received over 3,000 letters. Not emails, not tweets. Actual, handwritten letters, delivered in padded envelopes, scrawled on postcards, tucked inside folded notebook paper. They came from high schoolers and grandmothers, soldiers and nurses, men who hadn't cried in years, and women who remembered exactly what it felt like to be dismissed, doubted, or degraded in public. Some shared stories. Others simply said, "Thank you." Her assistant, Janine, placed them in 2 neat stacks each morning. Naomi read every one. She didn't rush, she didn't skim. She sat quietly in her office, phone off, blinds drawn, and read as if each letter carried the weight of something sacred. Because it did. One came from a woman named Dolores in Jackson, Mississippi. "I'm 72. I was a flight attendant in the 1970s. They called us stewardesses then. I wore the heels, smiled through the nonsense, swallowed my dignity 100 times a week. Back then, there weren't many black women in the skies. I kept my head down. I watched men get bumped to first while I was told, 'Sweetheart, you can't sit up here.' I never said a word. But you didn't just say something, you made them listen. Thank you, Miss Naomi. I never thought I'd live long enough to see someone like you own the whole damn plane." Naomi folded the letter and held it for a moment longer than usual. She didn't cry. She just pressed it to her chest for 5 seconds, then tucked it gently into her private drawer. Social media was still buzzing, but the tone had shifted. This wasn't just a slap video anymore. It had become something else. People weren't sharing it with outrage now. They were sharing it with purpose. Mothers posted it with captions like, "Show this to your daughters." Veterans posted it with, "Respect isn't optional." Young activists added, "She said nothing, but changed everything." News anchors started quoting Naomi's press line, "Respect is not a tier." A few even invited her to speak. CNN, MSNBC, PBS, even a quiet email from Oprah's team. Naomi declined most of them, except one. The set was quiet, classy, understated. Just 2 chairs, soft lighting, no dramatic music or applause. The host, a journalist named Michelle Stokes, was known for depth over drama. Naomi sat across from her, legs crossed, hands folded. Michelle began with the obvious. "Miss Braxton, why didn't you speak up on the plane? Why didn't you announce who you were in that moment?" Naomi's expression didn't change. "Because I wasn't there as a CEO. I was there as a passenger, and if my seat didn't earn me respect on its own, then announcing my title would have just protected me, not the next person." Michelle nodded slowly. "So you waited." "I watched," Naomi said, "and when it was time, I moved, quietly, but fully." Michelle leaned in slightly. "Did you ever consider just letting it go?" Naomi looked her dead in the eye. "I've spent 65 years watching women like me get taught to let it go." She didn't raise her voice, but the room held its breath. "I let it go into a policy, into a system, into something that makes sure next time the person sitting in 1A doesn't have to be a billionaire to be treated like a human being." That clip went viral within hours. Not the slap, not the reveal, that line. "I let it go into a policy." It hit differently, not just because it was powerful, but because it was practical. People started using the phrase in their own lives, on signs, in workshops, in conversations. A teacher in Detroit wrote it on her classroom wall. A barista in Boston printed it on a pin. A pastor in Georgia built a whole sermon around it. Back in Naomi's office, Grace stood at the door, holding a thick folder. "Ma'am," she said softly, "you might want to see this." Naomi motioned her in. Inside the folder were stories, not press, not complaints, just people. A young man in Seattle who finally reported his manager for bullying after watching Naomi's interview. A mother in Atlanta who sent her daughter to school with her natural hair for the first time. A college senior in Texas who walked into her final interview with the sentence, "I don't want this job because I look like I belong. I want it because I do belong." Naomi flipped through page after page. She didn't say a word for a long time. Then she handed the folder back to Grace. "Make sure we keep these," she said quietly. "All of them." "Yes, ma'am." Grace hesitated, then added, "It's more than Blackbird now. It's something bigger." Naomi looked up, steady as ever. "No," she said. "It's always been bigger. We just stopped pretending it wasn't." The first official day of first class every time didn't come with balloons or press kits. It arrived quietly, like most real changes do. No new uniforms, no shiny slogans, just a new kind of stillness in the air. Not fear, not confusion, awareness. From the first gate attendant to the last crew member in the break room, people knew. Naomi Braxton wasn't here to impress. She was here to reform, and she'd already started. Grace stood outside a glass-walled meeting room on the 4th floor of Ecliptica's headquarters. She still wasn't used to having her badge open doors without waiting for someone to buzz her in. Inside the room, a cluster of mid-level managers and flight training coordinators waited with notepads in hand. On the screen at the front, the Blackbird interface. Below it, a phrase now printed across every training packet. "Respect is the standard, not the reward." Naomi entered from the side door, not a second late. She didn't need a podium. She just stood at the front, blazer pressed, voice even. "Thank you for coming. This will be the first of many leadership recalibrations." A few people shifted in their seats. Naomi glanced around the room. "Let's be honest. For some of you, I'm not what you pictured when you imagined the person who'd be running this company." A pause. She didn't blink. "I'm not here to match your expectations. I'm here to reset them." That landed. Even the skeptical ones, especially them, sat straighter. Outside the meeting room, Grace sat beside the Blackbird operations desk, reviewing the latest weekly reports. She didn't look nervous anymore. She looked ready. Her team had expanded from 1 to 12 in the last 10 days. She now oversaw data auditing for crew behavior trends, anonymous passenger flagging review, and internal coaching pathways based on flagged scores. Not punishment, prevention. Naomi's only standing order had been clear. Use data to heal the system, not to humiliate people. Grace liked that. And what she liked even more? People were asking questions now. Crew members, real ones, not just managers, were emailing her. Not to complain, but to ask, "How can I improve my score?" Or, "Do you offer training for bias awareness?" They weren't scared. They were curious. And that, Grace realized, was the quiet miracle Naomi had designed. Later that afternoon, Naomi walked the floor of the Denver training hub. She moved slowly, not because of age or fatigue, but because she noticed everything. In one corner, a new hire practiced tone modulation with a speech coach. In another, a crew supervisor revised onboarding materials with a DEI specialist. In the corner lounge, 2 older attendants, graying, skeptical, watched her pass, then quickly straightened their shoulders. Naomi stopped, turned. "Gentlemen," she said, voice smooth. "You've been here how long?" 21 years, one said. 27, the other added. "Then you've seen a lot of policies," she said. The older of the 2 nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "And how many of them changed anything?" They hesitated. Then, "Not many." Naomi's tone didn't change.
This one will.
She didn't say it like a challenge. She said it like a promise. Then she turned and walked on. At the end of the day, Naomi returned to her office. Grace was waiting with a manila folder. "Weekly summary," she said. "One flagged incident. A crew member in Miami refused to make eye contact with 2 elderly black passengers." Naomi opened the file. "Behavioral score? 57, just above the warning line, but not malicious, just indifference." Naomi closed the folder. "Send him to a coaching cycle. Schedule a one-on-one with his supervisor, and follow up in 2 weeks." Grace nodded, already typing, then paused. "Do you ever worry," she asked quietly, "that they'll just perform better without believing better?" Naomi looked out the window, the city lights flickering beneath a setting sun. "Belief," she said softly, "comes after practice. Most people don't change because they're convinced. They change because they repeat a better pattern long enough that it becomes familiar." Grace smiled. "So fake it till you make it?" Naomi finally allowed a small smile. "No, practice it till it becomes you." That night, Naomi sat alone on her balcony, tea in hand. She didn't check the news. She didn't scroll social media. She just watched the city breathe. She wasn't chasing headlines. She wasn't trying to stay viral. Because what she was building didn't need attention. It needed time. She had given the system its mirror. And now, day by day, quietly, that system was starting to see itself clearly. What does leadership mean to you? Is it about who speaks the loudest or who listens the longest? Leave a comment. Someone reading may be stepping into leadership right now. Naomi Braxton boarded the plane quietly. No entourage, no fanfare, no whisper of ownership in her posture. Just a low chignon, a charcoal blazer, and a leather bag that had seen 100 cities. It was her first time flying since the slap. Not to oversee policy, not for a media tour, not even for business, just to fly. She was booked under her birth name this time, Naomi Elizabeth Carter, and flying alone. No one had flagged her reservation. No one offered to escort her to the front. And most importantly, no one looked at her like she didn't belong. That was all she wanted. The flight attendant at the front door smiled warmly. "Welcome aboard," she said with genuine ease. "Seat 2A, just there on the left." Naomi nodded. "Thank you." It was the smallest detail, but she noticed. The attendant didn't hesitate. She didn't scan her from head to toe. She didn't flinch when Naomi passed. And when Naomi reached her seat, the attendant leaned in again. "If you need anything at all, just press the button. We're honored to have you." Naomi blinked, just once, but her expression didn't change. She sat down, buckled her belt, and folded her hands in her lap. It was the first time in months she'd flown without having to measure the air around her. 15 minutes into the flight, as the plane leveled off, a teenage girl across the aisle caught Naomi's eye. She was maybe 16, curly hair tied back, hoodie a little too big, nervous energy wrapped around her like a second skin. She gave Naomi a polite smile. Naomi returned it. Then, hesitantly, the girl leaned across the aisle and whispered, "Excuse me, this might be weird, but have you flown Ecliptica before?" Naomi looked over. "I have," she said. The girl nodded. "This is my first time. My mom saved up so I could fly first class to meet my dad. He's military. I've never flown alone before." Naomi's voice was gentle. "You're doing great." The girl grinned, but her curiosity hadn't faded. "Is it always like this? I mean, people being so nice? Like the flight attendants and stuff?" Naomi looked around the cabin. One attendant was offering a blanket to an older woman without being asked. Another was crouched beside a passenger explaining a connecting flight. Even the tone of the intercom was softer now. No edge, no rush. She turned back to the girl. "It wasn't always," Naomi said, "but it is now." Midway through the flight, Naomi walked toward the galley to stretch her legs. The lead flight attendant, a young man in his 30s, noticed her and smiled. "Mrs. Carter, would you like some tea?" She raised an eyebrow slightly. "You remembered?" He shrugged. "We read notes. Your last 3 flights said you preferred Earl Grey with honey. Thought I'd try to impress." Naomi chuckled softly. "You did." He prepared the tea in silence, then handed it to her with both hands. "We've had a lot of changes lately," he said. "The new system, Blackbird. It scared some of us at first." Naomi took a sip. "And now?" He smiled, but it was thoughtful. "Now we don't just serve seats. We see people. And honestly, I sleep better." Naomi nodded. "That's the goal." He tilted his head, curious. "You're not who you say you are you?" She looked at him, unblinking. "I am," she said. "I just also happen to be someone else too." He laughed quietly. "Fair enough." She returned to her seat without another word. As the plane began its descent, Naomi gazed out the window. The sun was dropping below the clouds, casting gold across the wing. The teenage girl leaned over again. "You said you've flown before. Did something bad ever happen?" Naomi turned to her. "Yes," she said simply. "But I turned it into something good." The girl looked confused. "How?" Naomi gave a faint smile. "I built something, so people like you wouldn't have to ask that question someday." The girl didn't respond, but she sat back in her seat, straighter now. When the plane touched down, Naomi waited for the aisle to clear. She wasn't in a rush. Not anymore. The lead flight attendant stood at the exit, thanking each passenger. When Naomi reached him, he leaned in. "Thanks for building something better," he said softly. Naomi looked him in the eye. "Thanks for making it real." She stepped off the plane with no fanfare, no cameras, no headlines. But behind her, a system she'd once challenged was working, quietly, daily, humanely. And that was enough. The ballroom at the Westfield Aviation Summit wasn't built for silence. It had hosted galas, investment pitches, record-breaking contract signings. This was where billion-dollar aircraft deals were toasted over foie gras and vintage champagne. But today, the room was quiet. Not because no one was speaking, but because everyone was listening. On stage, beneath a soft spotlight, stood Naomi Braxton. No title on the screen behind her, no sizzle reel, just her name and a single phrase: "Respect is not a tier." She stood behind a slim podium, hands folded neatly, posture unshaken. She didn't open with a joke, or a story, or even her credentials. She simply said, "I want to tell you what I didn't do." The room blinked, unsure. "I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I didn't throw a fit. I didn't name drop. I didn't demand attention." She paused. "And I still changed the system." The crowd leaned in. A few recognized her now, not from Forbes or Bloomberg, but from that flight. From the clip. From the moment a woman in first class had been struck across the face and never once raised her voice. "You know the story," Naomi continued. "Or at least the viral version. The slap, the reveal, the press." A few heads nodded. But that was never the point. She took a slow breath. The point was what happened after. She moved away from the podium, letting the wireless mic catch her voice as she walked. "After the clip faded, I didn't sell the airline. I didn't sue the employee. I didn't collect apologies and call it a day." She turned back to the crowd. "I built a system. I installed accountability. I promoted new voices. I created a culture where service wasn't given based on suits or skin or seat numbers, but on humanity." The audience, made up of CEOs, HR directors, pilots, and union leaders, sat still. No murmurs, no phones out. They knew a pivot when they saw one. And this was the kind that moved industries. Naomi shared no spreadsheets, no charts. She told them about Grace, about Dolores, the former stewardess who finally felt seen, about the teenage girl on the plane who asked, "Is it always like this?" I didn't want her to grow up believing service was something she had to earn by looking a certain way, Naomi said. I wanted her to grow up expecting it as a baseline. She looked out at the room. At some point, you'll each go back to your terminals, your fleet meetings, your crisis calls. Someone will suggest cutting training hours, shaving crew ratios, or skipping inclusion reviews to streamline operations. She let that settle. When that moment comes, ask yourself, are you building an airline, or are you building a culture? Applause didn't erupt. It rose, steady, reverent. Not for theatrics, for truth. When Naomi stepped down from the stage, the entire front row stood. By the time she reached the hallway, 6 executives had already sent texts to their policy teams. The woman who never asked for attention had, once again, shifted everything. Outside the ballroom, Naomi stood near a quiet corridor exit, sipping a glass of water. A young woman approached, late 20s, smart blazer, conference badge swinging from her lanyard. Ms. Braxton? She asked. I just wanted to say, I work in pilot operations. I'm usually behind the scenes, but after today, I want to be at the table. Naomi smiled gently. Good, she said. Pull up a chair. That evening, Naomi returned to her hotel suite, kicked off her shoes, and opened the window. The city lights blinked like scattered constellations. Somewhere far below, planes were taking off, landing, repeating the rhythm of an industry that never sleeps. She didn't need to watch anymore. She knew what was moving out there. Weeks later, the feedback systems she implemented reached their first milestone. Thousands of passengers had submitted real-time reviews. Not just star ratings or generic surveys, but moments. Moments when someone made them feel safe, heard, seen. One came from a woman flying with her autistic son. Another from a man who had lost his wife the month before. One simply said, "The attendant looked me in the eye. That's it. That was the first time someone had done that all day. Thank you." Naomi read them all, and she smiled. Not for the praise, but because the system was working. She didn't need to go viral again, didn't need another speech, didn't need to remind anyone who she was, because now they remembered how she made them feel. And that, more than money, more than power, was the legacy she had chosen to leave in the air. If you had a chance to change just one thing, quietly, powerfully, what would it be? Drop your answer in the comments. Your next step might just inspire someone else's.